Hey guys, tonight we slip into a world before the world, before cities, before stories, before even time had figured out what to do with itself. Imagine the deepest black you've ever seen. Now imagine that black has no top, no bottom, no edges, and definitely no Wi Fi. That's where you are now, floating in chaos. Not chaos like your sock drawer, but the original capital C chaos, a yawning void, a cosmic blank slate. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to know where in the world you're falling asleep tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. From this shadowy nothingness, the first forces emerge, not with bangs or sparkles, but like thoughts forming behind closed eyes. First came Gaia, the earth itself, not a planet, but a full-bodied force of fertile soil, gentle hills, and the promise of life. Next came Uranus, the sky, stretching endlessly over her. Together, they formed the first divine power couple, though their relationship makes the Kardashians look understated. You're born into this early divine family, like some cosmic intern with no benefits, watching as Gaia gives birth to mountains, seas, and then, gulp, Uranus's children, the Titans. There's Oceanus, who wraps the world in salty waves, and Hyperion, a sun guy with eyes like fire. But the real attention goes to Cronus, the youngest, whose eyes always seem just a bit too clever. Uranus, however, is not winning Father of the Year. He takes one look at some of his kids, like the hundred-handed Hecatoncheires, and decides they're too weird to exist, stuffing them back into Gaia's womb. Yes, you heard that right, into her. You try not to think too hard about the anatomy of it all. Gaia, understandably upset at being used as divine storage, hatches a plan. She hands Cronus a jagged sickle made of unbreakable stone and basically says, "You know what to do." And Cronus, definitely not overthinking this, waits until Uranus drifts down to visit Gaia, and then leaps up with that sickle like a mythological ninja. The resulting snip-snip moment sends shockwaves through the heavens. Uranus's blood births more weird entities like the Furies, who will later specialize in haunting murderers, and the ash tree nymphs, which are less scary unless you're allergic to pollen. And what happened to Uranus's, you know? Legend says it fell into the sea, where it foamed and frothed until Aphrodite emerged. Yes, the goddess of love was literally born from a floating piece of celestial junk. Sleep tight. Now Cronus is king of the cosmos, but being king makes him paranoid. He marries his sister Rhea, classic myth move, and starts having kids. But the moment he hears a prophecy that one of his children will overthrow him, Cronus develops some severe trust issues. His solution? Swallow the babies, whole, no chewing, no sauce. So you stand awkwardly in the shadows as Rhea tries to keep birthing children without losing them to Dad's digestive tract. When she finally gets to baby Zeus, she's had enough. She sneaks the newborn off to a cave in Crete and wraps a rock in swaddling clothes. Cronus, not exactly the most observant eater, gulps the rock without blinking. Parents of the year, truly. Meanwhile, Zeus grows up hidden away, raised on honey and goat's milk. You hang out with him under star-filled skies, watching as he flexes, trains, and occasionally throws rocks at trees just for fun. The air smells like pine and mischief. When he's ready, Zeus returns, not as a child, but as a storm-eyed force of nature. With help from Metis, a clever goddess whose name literally means cunning thought, Zeus tricks Cronus into vomiting up his siblings, Poseidon, Hades, Hera, Demeter, and Hestia, all fully grown and slightly traumatized. Yes, you get to watch this reverse birthing process, and no, it's not pretty. Together, these siblings become the new generation of gods. But the Titans aren't handing over power without a fight. What follows is the Titanomachy, a war so loud it rattles Mount Olympus before it's even built. You spend years ducking flying mountains and lava-spewing beasts. At one point, Zeus releases the Hecatonchires, the hundred-handed giants Cronus had imprisoned, and suddenly there are so many fists punching at once that you lose count. The war ends with the Titans chained in Tartarus, a pit so deep it makes the Mariana Trench look like a kiddie pool. And Zeus? He's now in charge. But ruling isn't easy. The universe still trembles with leftover chaos, and Zeus's siblings all want their piece of the pie. They divide the cosmos, like kids arguing over inheritance. Zeus gets the sky, Poseidon the sea, and Hades the underworld. Gaia watches silently from below, probably wondering why she even bothered creating all this in the first place. By now, you're dizzy from all the power shifts and divine betrayals. But we're just getting started. Greek mythology has only barely cleared its throat. You blink, and suddenly you're surrounded by sky-high stone thrones, blazing torches, and gods who behave more like hormonal teenagers than supreme beings. Zeus may be in charge now, but there's no peace conference or spa day following the Titanomachy. Nope. The world still pulses with divine anxiety, and somewhere deep beneath your feet, Gaia is not happy with how her Titan children have been treated. So naturally, she gives birth to a new threat: the giants, colossal, hairy, occasionally snake-legged creatures with attitudes as big as their clubs. You wake up one morning to find them hurling boulders at the heavens like angry toddlers chucking building blocks. This is the Gigantomachy, and it makes the last war look like a slap fight at a family barbecue. The Olympians scramble. You watch from behind a laurel bush as Athena body slams a giant into the dirt, and Apollo turns his arrows into flaming comets. Zeus? He's hurling lightning like he's playing dodgeball on cheat mode. But the giants don't fall easily. According to one fringe version of the myth, their defeat requires a mortal, so you, or someone like you, would need to step in. Historians still argue whether this detail snuck in later, once heroes like Heracles were invented to boost the drama. Either way, the giants are eventually crushed, some literally, buried under islands, like Sicily, which explains the earthquakes if you ask the ancient Greeks. But hey, victory doesn't make anyone emotionally mature. And if you thought divine parenting would improve, well, nope. Enter Cronus Jr., aka Zeus with boundary issues. Remember how Cronus feared being overthrown by his kids? Turns out, apple doesn't fall far from the petrified tree. Zeus hears a prophecy that one of his children will overthrow him. And so begins the new tradition of messing up your family tree like it's a game of mythological Monopoly. He swallows his first wife, Metis, whole, not because she annoyed him, but because she might give birth to a child stronger than him. In a cosmic twist, Athena is later born fully grown and fully armored from Zeus's forehead, like a migraine with a spear. You're there for it too, nervously holding a towel while Hephaestus splits Zeus's skull open with an axe. Nobody calls a doctor. This is fine. Then there's Hera, Zeus's official queen. Though happy marriage is not a concept that exists on Mount Olympus. Hera is majestic, terrifying, and really, really tired of Zeus's eternal game of Guess how many secret mortal girlfriends I have. Their family is less nurturing embrace and more constant divine reality show. You know things are bad when even their kid, Hephaestus, gets tossed off a mountain just for being ugly. Meanwhile, the Titans, who weren't imprisoned in Tartarus, try to live normal-ish lives. Like Prometheus, the rebel genius who creates humans out of clay. You watch as he delicately shapes your ancestors with divine fingers, breathing life into them like a potter whispering secrets into the kiln. Humans are fragile, cold, and not particularly bright, so Prometheus steals fire from the gods to help them out. And Zeus, not one to take theft lightly, punishes him with eternal liver-pecking courtesy of an eagle. Every single day. Fun fact, Prometheus's name means forethought, but maybe not enough forethought to avoid bird-based torture. Oh, and because punishing one guy isn't enough, Zeus sends Pandora to humans, a beautiful woman with a mysterious jar. Yes, jar, not box. Translation quirks are wild. You try to warn her not to open it, but she does, of course, because mythic curiosity is fatal. Outflies every misery known to mankind. Disease, despair, taxes. Okay, not taxes specifically, but close enough. Only hope remains inside, like a whisper at the bottom. By now, you've noticed a pattern. Gods create problems, blame others, and then offer strange consolation prizes. You're not sure if you're part of the solution or just a bystander with front row seats to immortal dysfunction. The world continues to fill with divine offspring and scandalous side quests. The earth teems with nymphs, demigods, and monsters with too many heads. Medusa, for example, was once a beautiful woman before Athena turned her hair into snakes because she got romantically involved in the wrong temple. Now, she turns men to stone with a glance, which honestly might be a useful dating tactic today. You also hear whispers of Typhon, the last child of Gaia, a storm dragon horror with 100 heads that shoot fire. When he attacks Olympus, all the gods literally flee in disguise. Zeus eventually defeats him with a lightning strike strong enough to reshape geography. But it's a near thing. Typhon is buried under Mount Etna. If it rumbles, well, blame the last great monster. So, while Zeus reigns supreme, it's clear that power here comes with instability baked in. Sibling rivalries are eternal. Marriages come with grudges, and no god seems capable of keeping their kids from becoming the next threat. At night, you lay back on soft moss and stare up at the constellations, many of which were once living beings, flung into the stars as either reward or punishment. Orion, the hunter. Andromeda, the chained maiden. They sparkle overhead like reminders that in Greek mythology, everyone's fate is etched somewhere, even if it's just in the sky. You're jolted awake by shouting, this time, not gods, but humans. Mortals have entered the scene for real now, and boy, do they have drama. You're in the heroic age, that golden sliver of time when regular humans start brushing elbows with the divine and occasionally punching them in the face. Your first stop is Thebes, a city with a birth certificate written in myth. Its founder, Cadmus, follows a talking cow. Yes, a cow, until it lies down, and there he builds the city. Along the way, he kills a dragon sacred to Ares and, because this is myth and bad decisions are mandatory, plants its teeth. From the earth spring up armored warriors who immediately begin fighting each other. This is how Thebes starts. Cow, dragon, spontaneous warriors. Try fitting that on a tourism brochure. You stick around long enough to watch Cadmus's descendants suffer the curse of, well, being Cadmus's descendants. His great-grandson, Oedipus, is the walking embodiment of a bad riddle answer. He kills his father at a crossroads in a road rage incident and unknowingly marries his mother. When he figures it out, cue self-inflicted eye gouging and the start of Greek tragedy as a genre. Historians still argue whether Oedipus was meant to be sympathetic or just a cautionary tale with the world's worst family tree. But Thebes isn't alone in the myth spotlight. Further south, you wander into Mycenae, where the air smells faintly of olive oil and betrayal. This city pumps out cursed royals, like it's an assembly line. It all starts with Tantalus, who serves his own son as a meal to the gods. They notice, except Demeter, who accidentally eats a shoulder. Fast forward a generation or two, and you get Atreus and Thyestes, two brothers who engage in a culinary revenge cycle involving more surprised children in stew than anyone should ever encounter. Eventually, Agamemnon, king of Mycenae and walking war magnet, is born into this mess. Agamemnon is important because he'll later lead the Greeks to war against Troy, but not before he angers Artemis by killing one of her sacred deer. She demands a sacrifice, his daughter, Iphigenia. You're there as the wind stills and the army waits, quiet as the gods hold their breath. Whether Iphigenia is actually sacrificed or whisked away by the goddess remains an open question. Some ancient versions offer a plot twist rescue, others not so comforting. In contrast to this grim lineage, you meet a man named Perseus, son of Zeus and Danae, who has a marginally more functional heroic arc. He's tasked with beheading Medusa, not the ideal weekend plan. You hide behind a rock as he uses a mirrored shield to sneak up on her, slicing her head clean off. From her neck spills not just blood, but Pegasus, the winged horse. Medusa, even decapitated, remains active. Her head gets turned into a weapon of its own, a literal stony glare tool kept in Athena's handbag. Perseus's journey doesn't end with Medusa. He saves Andromeda, chained to a rock as monster bait, and the two fall in love because, well, high adrenaline situations do that. He also accidentally kills his grandfather with a discus at a sports competition. Oops. Fate always finds a way. Meanwhile, down in Crete, things are getting labyrinthine, literally. King Minos angers Poseidon by refusing to sacrifice a divine bull. The punishment? His wife, Pasiphae, falls in love with the bull and gives birth to the Minotaur, a creature with the body of a man and the head of a bull. You don't even want to know how that worked. The Minotaur gets locked in a maze built by Daedalus, a brilliant inventor who probably didn't ask enough questions when drawing up the blueprints. Eventually, Theseus, Prince of Athens, volunteers to enter the labyrinth and slay the beast. With the help of Minos' daughter, Ariadne, and her famous ball of string, he makes it out alive. But in true Greek hero fashion, he promptly abandons Ariadne on an island and sails home, forgetting to change his ship's black sails. His father, thinking him dead, throws himself off a cliff. This is how you get the name Aegean Sea, named after a tragic misunderstanding. Greek geography, brought to you by family trauma. And you haven't even met Heracles yet. He's the mythological overachiever with rage issues and an endless to-do list. Zeus's illegitimate son, Heracles, is so strong that he strangles snakes in his crib. Later in life, Hera drives him mad, out of spite, obviously, and he kills his own wife and children. To atone, he must complete 12 impossible tasks, the labors of Heracles, ranging from cleaning stables full of immortal horse poop to capturing a three-headed hellhound with zero leash training. The smell? Unbelievable. You tag along as he wrestles lions, reroutes rivers, and drinks enough wine to floor a centaur. He kills monsters, retrieves golden apples, and even brings someone back from the underworld. Fringe scholars say Heracles' labors symbolize the sun's movement through the zodiac, but most listeners just remember the time he dressed up as a woman to entertain a queen. Gender roles? Flexible. Each of these stories loops back into the same dizzying swirl of fate, divine meddling, and impossible choices. You start to feel like every action, no matter how noble or accidental, is part of some enormous, tangled spider web. Every hero you meet carries a curse in their back pocket. Every monster used to be someone else's daughter, lover, or pet project gone wrong. By now, the world feels richly populated with tales carved into every mountain, whispered in every olive grove, and crackling in every hearth fire. But you're just getting started. Across the Aegean, a war is brewing, and the seeds were planted long ago with an apple. The sun glints off the surface of the Aegean Sea, and you drift toward a wedding. Not yours, don't worry. It's a divine affair, the marriage of Peleus and the sea nymph Thetis. You squeeze into a corner with the minor gods and bored-looking nymphs. Everyone who's anyone is here, except Eris, goddess of discord. She wasn't invited, probably because her +1 is always chaos. Naturally, she shows up anyway. Eris throws a golden apple into the crowd. It's inscribed with 3 damning words: for the fairest. Instantly, the mood shifts. 3 goddesses, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, step forward, each claiming it. You wince, already seeing where this is going. To settle the dispute, the gods decide to let a mortal choose. Enter Paris, Prince of Troy, vacationing in the hills as a humble shepherd because of a prophecy that he'd ruin everything. Which, spoiler alert, he will. The 3 goddesses bribe him shamelessly. Hera offers power. Athena promises wisdom. And Aphrodite, playing dirty, offers the love of the world's most beautiful woman. Paris, a hormonal teenager in disguise, gives the apple to Aphrodite. Historians still argue whether this judgment of Paris was meant as a moral tale or just ancient shade-throwing. Either way, the fate of Troy is sealed in a single impulsive choice. That beautiful woman Aphrodite promised? Helen, Queen of Sparta. Unfortunately, she's already married to Menelaus, who is not in the mood to lose his wife to a Trojan playboy. When Paris arrives in Sparta, Helen either falls in love or gets abducted. Depends on which version you're reading. Either way, she ends up in Troy, and Menelaus is furious. He calls in a favor. Every major Greek king and warrior had sworn to protect Helen's marriage, which is a terrible idea in retrospect. You watch as ships are built, spears are sharpened, and egos are inflated. Agamemnon becomes the Greek commander, dragging along his brother Menelaus and a cast of characters that read like a bad group project. There's clever Odysseus, who fakes madness to avoid the war, but gets caught when someone places his baby in front of his plow. There's Achilles, nearly invincible, dipped in the river Styx by his heel, but also weirdly temperamental. His mother, Thetis, hides him among women to keep him out of the war. That works about as well as hiding a tiger in a preschool. 10 years of war follow, but you don't get a simple good guys versus bad guys narrative. The Greeks are squabbling, The Trojans are despairing, and the gods, oh, they're deeply involved. Athena, Hera, and Poseidon support the Greeks. Aphrodite, Apollo, and Artemis back the Trojans. Zeus mostly stays neutral, except when he doesn't. It's divine fantasy football, and the humans are just pieces on the board. You walk beside Hector, Prince of Troy, as he says goodbye to his wife and son. He knows he's not coming back. He's brave, noble, and heartbreakingly doomed. You also hover near Achilles, sulking in his tent after Agamemnon steals his war prize, Briseis. Achilles refuses to fight, and the Greeks start losing only when his close friend Patroclus dies. Some say lover, some say brother in arms. Does Achilles return to the battlefield in a rage so hot it bends the sky? He kills Hector, drags his body around the walls of Troy, and refuses to return it. Eventually, Hector's father, King Priam, sneaks into Achilles' tent and begs for his son's body. And here, at last, Achilles shows some humanity. He weeps, he relents. It's one of those moments that slows your heart down just enough to feel the weight of all this. But the war isn't over. The Amazons arrive, female warriors who fight like hurricanes. Achilles kills their queen, Penthesilea, and immediately regrets it. You spot his expression, something like awe, something like sorrow. Her beauty, her strength. It all hits him too late. Eventually, Achilles himself dies, shot in the heel by Paris with help from Apollo. That heel, the one spot left unguarded. You almost laugh. It's too poetic. Achilles dies, and still the war drags on. Then Odysseus, the wily one, hatches a plan. You know it. Everyone does. The Trojan horse. A giant wooden statue offered as a peace gift. The Trojans pull it inside their walls, unaware that it's packed with Greek soldiers. That night, while Troy sleeps, the Greeks slip out and open the gates. Fire, screams, pillage. The city falls. Helen, somehow, ends up back in Sparta. Some say she regrets everything. Some say she never left willingly. Others say the real Helen was in Egypt the whole time, and Troy burned for a phantom. Scholars still debate whether Helen was a pawn, a player, or merely poetic license with legs. The war ends, but it leaves a crater in the world. Troy smolders, survivors scatter, and the Greeks? They don't sail home quietly. Their stories are just beginning. The smoke of Troy still lingers behind you as the sea air turns sharp and moody. You're not headed home just yet. You're following one very tired, very clever man, Odysseus. The war is over, but his journey, the Odyssey, is just beginning. And if you think it's a straight sail back to Ithaca, think again. You'll be dodging monsters, storms, and divine grudges for the next decade. Odysseus sets sail with his crew, but Poseidon is not exactly sending them off with a fruit basket. The sea god is livid. Odysseus blinded his beloved Cyclops son, Polyphemus, and bragged about it afterward. Not the move, hero. So Poseidon does what Poseidon does best: mess with sea travel. Odysseus is blown off course, shipwrecked, and sidetracked so often it's like trying to get home from work and accidentally circumnavigating the globe. First stop, the island of the Lotus Eaters, where the locals offer his men a sweet, dreamy fruit that makes them forget everything, including home. You shake them awake, swatting the fruit out of their hands. It smells like honey, and oblivion. Odysseus ties them to the benches and rows away. Then comes the Cyclops cave, where you tiptoe around wheels of cheese the size of minivans. Polyphemus lumbers in, sniffs the air, and eats two men raw. Charming guy. Odysseus devises a plan. He gets the Cyclops drunk, tells him his name is Nobody, and then blinds him with a heated steak while he sleeps. As the creature bellows in pain and calls for help, he says, "Nobody is hurting me." So the other Cyclopes ignore him. Quirky trick, but it'll cost Odysseus later. You escape under the bellies of sheep. Yes, really, and flee to the next disaster. Aeolus, keeper of the winds, who gifts Odysseus a bag containing all the unruly breezes. They're within sight of Ithaca when the crew, assuming the bag contains treasure, opens it. Whoosh! Back to square one. Historians still argue whether this moment reflects poor leadership or just terminally dumb crewmates. Next, the Lastrygonians, a race of giant cannibals, sink almost the entire fleet. You swim past bobbing oars and driftwood, clinging to one of the last remaining ships. Then it's on to Circe's island, the sorceress who turns men into pigs. You don't even blink at this point. Odysseus, with help from Hermes, resists her spell and demands she restore his men. She does, and then hosts him for an entire year. Honestly, it's hard to blame him. Her island is full of wine, warmth, and no wars. Eventually, Circe tells him he needs to consult the dead because apparently things weren't spooky enough already. You descend with him into the underworld, where shadows whisper and ancient souls drift like smoke. There, he meets Tiresias, the blind prophet who warns him about cattle, storms, and Poseidon's grudge. He also sees his mother and fallen comrades. Achilles is there too, who says he'd rather be a poor farmer alive than a dead hero praised in songs. You swallow that one slowly. You're barely catching your breath when the sea swells again. The sirens sing from a rocky shore, their voices sticky with longing. Odysseus has himself tied to the mast, ears open to their song, while the crew stuffs theirs with wax. You listen too. It sounds like every answer you've ever wanted, layered in melody, and then gone. Next comes Scylla and Charybdis, a six-headed monster and a whirlpool respectively. You pass between them, holding your breath as Scylla plucks six screaming men from the deck. There's no winning here, just surviving. And then the cattle. The island of the sun god, Helios. Tiresias warned them, "Do not touch the sacred cows." But the crew, starving and foolish, slaughters one while Odysseus sleeps. The gods retaliate. Zeus sends a lightning bolt. The ship splinters. Odysseus alone survives, clinging to driftwood, washed up eventually on the shores of Calypso's island. There, the immortal nymph keeps him as a lover for 7 years. She offers him immortality, a life without sorrow. He says no. You wonder how many mortals would have made the same call. Some scholars still debate whether Calypso's island is allegory or lost geography, but Odysseus' longing is real enough. At last, the gods relent. Odysseus builds a raft and washes ashore in Scheria, where he's taken in by the Phaeacians. He recounts his whole saga at a banquet, and you realize the entire Odyssey up to now, has been a flashback. The Phaeacians, impressed and probably exhausted, finally ferry him home to Ithaca. After 20 years, he steps onto familiar soil, disguised as a beggar. His palace, overrun by suitors, pressuring his wife Penelope to remarry. She's held them off with cleverness, like weaving a shroud by day and unraveling it at night. Odysseus, with help from his son Telemachus, his old nurse, and a loyal swineherd, because pigs always come back into play, slaughters the suitors. It's messy, not PG. You close your eyes for some of it. Finally, Penelope tests him, asks the beggar about their bed, which he built from a living tree. He knows, she knows, and after 20 years, the two are reunited, quietly, no parades, just recognition in silence. And just like that, you realize something. Odysseus wasn't the strongest, the fastest, or the most noble, but he was the most human. Flawed, clever, tired, and stubborn enough to keep going. You might not have survived his journey, but you definitely felt every step of it. You're still rubbing salt spray from your eyes when the sky cracks open again. This time, not with lightning, but with prophecy. You drift upward now, far from mortal ships and sunburnt warriors. Welcome to Mount Olympus, where the gods lounge, squabble, and shape the fates of mortals like kids flicking marbles across the cosmos. 12 thrones circle the peak. Zeus, king of the gods, is front and center, probably adjusting his thunderbolt settings like someone fiddling with a remote. Around him, Hera, his wife and sister, yes, both, seething in her usual, dignified way. The drama here makes daytime TV look like a Sunday nap. Olympus is the control tower of Greek mythology. From here, gods interfere in mortal affairs as casually as you might comment on someone's lunch. They fall in love with humans, curse kings, start wars over apples. And yes, there are actual office politics up here. Petty jealousies, vengeance quests, romantic triangles with side quests. Let's break down the Olympian roster, because it's a who's who of divine chaos. First up, Athena, goddess of wisdom and war strategy. She's Zeus's favorite, born straight from his forehead after he swallowed her pregnant mother to avoid a prophecy. Totally normal dad move. Athena's calm, armored, and all about rational justice. If you had a job interview or a courtroom drama ahead, you'd want her in your corner. Then there's Ares, god of war, but the other kind. He's brutal, bloodthirsty, and not super bright. Athena outwits him, regularly. They're technically siblings, but more like chess versus bar fight. Apollo is the golden boy, literally. God of music, sun, prophecy, and plagues. He once flayed a satyr alive for losing a music contest. Historians still argue whether this was a metaphor for artistic ego or just straight-up divine overreaction. His twin, Artemis, is the virgin huntress, protector of wild animals, and fan of turning creepy guys into deer if they spy on her bathing. Fair enough. Hermes wears winged sandals and talks fast, god of travelers, thieves, and witty comebacks. He's the divine delivery guy, zipping between Olympus and Earth, ferrying souls to the underworld and occasionally stealing cows as a baby. Really. Then there's Hephaestus, god of fire and blacksmiths, born with a limp and hurled from Olympus by his own mother, Hera, because he wasn't pretty enough. Later, he marries Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty, match made in somewhere weird. She cheats on him constantly with Ares. Hephaestus once traps them mid-act in a golden net and invites all the gods to laugh. Yes, really. It's all very mythological soap opera. Demeter, goddess of the harvest, keeps humanity fed until someone angers her. When her daughter Persephone is abducted by Hades and dragged to the underworld, Demeter plunges the world into winter until she's returned. This little custody battle is literally the mythological explanation for the seasons. Winter equals Demeter pouting. Then there's Dionysus, the last to join the Olympian circle. God of wine, ecstasy, and theater. You never quite know what version of Dionysus will show up. Joyful reveler or deranged vine-twisting avenger. He inspires both wild parties and divine madness. A favorite among college students and ancient drama clubs. Of course, Hestia, goddess of the hearth, quietly steps away from her throne to make room for Dionysus. She's rarely mentioned, preferring to keep the fire lit at home. Some myths call her the most beloved because she never stirred trouble. You sort of want to give her a hug. And then, back to Zeus, the sky god, who has more children than any pantheon registrar can keep up with. He turns into golden rain, swans, bulls, you name it, to seduce mortal women, which causes a lot of trouble on Earth. Hera, understandably, spends most of her time plotting revenge on his mistresses and their children. Sometimes she punishes them before they're even born. Harsh. But then again, she didn't sign up for a husband with infinite shape-shifting pickup lines. Even the gods aren't immortal in the way you'd think. Their power wanes, their stories evolve. Some scholars suggest the Olympians are echoes of earlier Indo-European deities, reshaped by Greek culture. Others argue they're just very old metaphors wearing togas. But Olympus isn't all frivolous lightning bolts and divine shade throwing. These gods reflect us, our best hopes, our worst impulses, and our chaotic contradictions. They're human enough to be petty, divine enough to be terrifying. And the best part? They never truly leave. Their names echo through planets, days of the week, and star-crossed lover memes. You've seen them on coffee cups, in art museums, tattooed on someone's calf at the gym. You realize, watching Zeus chuckle over a thundercloud or Dionysus spill another goblet of wine, that Olympus isn't somewhere far above. It's right here, in all the messy, glorious theater of life. You descend from Olympus like a falling leaf, brushing through clouds still crackling with leftover lightning. The divine drama fades behind you, replaced by the dusty clatter of armor, sandaled feet, and the sharpening of bronze. You've landed smack in the middle of the most famous war in Greek mythology, maybe in all mythology. Yep, the Trojan War. This isn't just a battle over stolen love. It's a decade-long epic jam-packed with gods meddling, egos inflating, and bodies piling up like it's end-of-season clearance at a sword shop. And honestly, you're already exhausted, and we haven't even started. It begins, as most legendary disasters do, with a wedding gone sideways. The sea nymph Thetis is marrying mortal Peleus, and all the gods are invited, except one. Eris, goddess of discord. Naturally, she crashes the party and rolls in a golden apple labeled "to the fairest." Chaos ensues. Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite all claim the prize. Classic. they turn to a mortal to judge. Paris, a prince of Troy, whose main qualification seems to be looks good shirtless. Each goddess bribes him. Hera offers power. Athena offers wisdom. Aphrodite, well, she offers the most beautiful woman in the world. Helen, who is unfortunately already married to Menelaus, king of Sparta. Paris picks Aphrodite. Helen is whisked away to Troy. Cue rage, ships, in the wrath of 1,000 Greek warriors led by Menelaus's brother, Agamemnon, who probably needed a war to justify his terrible management style. Now, the war itself could fill a dozen scrolls. And it did. The most famous is Homer's Iliad, which only covers a few weeks near the war's end. So, you get ancient drama with no real beginning or ending, like tuning into season 6 of a soap opera without a recap. Among the Greeks, you meet Achilles, the moody demigod with unmatched fighting skills and a mother who dipped him in the river Styx for invincibility, except for that pesky heel she held him by. He's sulking in his tent because Agamemnon stole his war prize. A woman, because, yes, that's how things worked back then. Meanwhile, warriors die by the hundreds while Achilles stews like a caffeinated poet. You also meet Odysseus, cleverest of the Greeks, always scheming, always slippery. And Ajax, the brute with the personality of a doorframe but the strength of a wrecking ball. The Greeks throw themselves against Troy's walls, but it's a slog. 10 long years of mud, loss, and divine interference. Because the gods aren't just spectating, they're playing favorites like it's fantasy football. Athena and Hera back the Greeks. Aphrodite and Apollo root for Troy. Zeus just tries to avoid getting yelled at by Hera honestly. And then there's Patroclus, Achilles' close friend, possibly lover. Historians still argue whether their bond was romantic or just deeply intimate. When Patroclus dons Achilles' armor and is killed by Hector, Prince of Troy, Achilles finally snaps. His grief turns to fury. He rejoins the battle and slays Hector in a duel that shakes the sand. But instead of returning Hector's body, Achilles drags it behind his chariot in a display of rage so intense even the gods flinch. Only after Hector's father, old Priam, sneaks into the Greek camp and begs, literally kisses Achilles' hands, does the hero relent. That moment, tender and brutal, is where the Iliad ends. But the war keeps going. Achilles is eventually killed by Paris, who shoots an arrow, guided by Apollo, into that vulnerable heel. Ouch. Then there's the infamous Trojan horse, Odysseus' idea to trick the Trojans with, filled with hidden warriors. The Trojans bring it inside the city walls. Night falls. The Greeks pour out. Troy burns. The city is destroyed, its people scattered or enslaved. A civilization turned to ashes over a single face, or, more accurately, because gods got bored and men got proud. You're left wandering the battlefield, stepping over broken spears and smoldering dreams, and maybe you wonder, was it ever about Helen? Or was she just an excuse for glory, for vengeance, for stories? You hear whispers that Helen returned to Sparta like nothing happened. Others say she fled to Egypt and never even went to Troy. Some scholars debate whether Helen was a real person or a personified concept of desire and conflict. Either way, the war echoes down through time, through poetry, plays, and pop culture. And here's the thing about war stories, they're never really over. They linger, like smoke in the folds of your clothes. The heroes become myths. The myths become lessons. The lessons get ignored. Still, you walk on through the aftermath towards something stranger, more personal. Because one man is still trying to get home, and his journey's going to twist mythology into something deeper. The embers of Troy still glow behind you as you follow a lone sail cutting across the wine-dark sea. It flutters like a sigh, carrying a man who's seen too much. You climb aboard, and just like that, you're on the Odyssey. A journey so winding, it practically invented the word. Meet Odysseus, king of Ithaca, war hero, trickster, proud owner of the worst commute in history. It should have taken him a couple of weeks to get home after the war. Instead, 10 years. 10 years of monsters, magic, mutiny, and cosmic level bad luck. You'd think stabbing a cyclops in the eye might slow a guy down. But no, this is Greek mythology, and nothing is ever simple. The trouble starts early. Odysseus and his crew land on the island of the Lotus Eaters, where locals munch on dreamy, druggy lotus flowers. Take a bite and poof, you forget everything, including that you have a home or a job or bills to pay. Odysseus has to drag his stoned sailors back onto the ship like a stern dad after a music festival. Next stop, Polyphemus, a giant cyclops who keeps sheep and snacks on humans. He traps Odysseus and his men in a cave, planning to eat them one by one. Not ideal. But Odysseus, ever the schemer, gets him drunk, blinds him with a burning stake, and sneaks out by clinging to the undersides of sheep. Clever, right? Unfortunately, he can't resist bragging as they sail away. "Tell him Odysseus did this," he shouts. Big mistake. Polyphemus is the son of Poseidon, god of the sea, who now makes it his full-time job to ruin Odysseus's life. Cue storms, detours, and divine punishment. You wonder if Odysseus could have just kept his mouth shut. But where's the drama in that? The journey spirals into a highlight reel of mythical oddities. There's Aeolus, keeper of the winds, who gives Odysseus a bag filled with breezes. But his crew thinks it's treasure, opens it, and whoosh, they're blown all the way back to square one. Trust issues? Yeah, those bloom nicely. Then there are the Laestrygonians, giant cannibals who destroy most of Odysseus' fleet by hurling boulders like it's Greek dodgeball. Only one ship survives. Morale is low. They reach Circe's island, where the sorceress turns men into pigs, literal pigs. But instead of getting eaten, Odysseus seduces her, with some help from Hermes and a magical herb, and they shack up for a year. Time moves strangely here, like vacation mode on steroids. When they finally leave, Circe's parting advice: go to the underworld, because, sure, why not? And so they do. In Hades, Odysseus speaks to the ghost of Tiresias, a blind prophet who warns him about cattle, curses, and hubris. He also chats with Achilles, who famously says he'd rather be a poor farmer alive than a glorious dead hero. Historians still debate whether this reflects Homer's shifting views on honor and mortality, or just Achilles rethinking his life choices. Back above ground, the dangers pile up. You pass the sirens, whose songs lure sailors to a watery death. Odysseus plugs his crew's ears with wax and has himself tied to the mast so he can listen without diving in. Of course he does. You just nod and hope nobody's filming this. Then there's Scylla and Charybdis, a six-headed monster on one side, a whirlpool on the other. Odysseus sacrifices a few men to Scylla to avoid being sucked into the abyss. Tough call, but in Greek myth, survival is rarely tidy. And remember those cattle? On the island of Helios, the sun god's sacred herd grazes peacefully. Odysseus warns his crew, do not touch. They, of course, barbecue the cows the second he's not looking. In response, Zeus blasts their ship to splinters. Everyone dies, except Odysseus. He washes ashore on Ogygia, home of the nymph Calypso, who falls in love with him and keeps him as a well-fed captive for 7 years. He spends his days weeping on the beach, which is both poetic and kind of hilarious. You'd feel bad if he hadn't hooked up with Circe, like 2 islands ago. Eventually, the gods, nudged by Athena, who's basically Odysseus's celestial life coach, force Calypso to let him go. He builds a raft, survives yet another storm, thanks again, Poseidon, and ends up on Scheria, land of the Phaeacians, who finally help him return to Ithaca. But don't get too cozy. Back home, everything's a mess. His wife Penelope is being swarmed by suitors. His palace has turned into a frat house. Everyone thinks he's dead. So what does he do? He disguises himself as a beggar, tests the loyalty of his servants, strings his legendary bow, then slaughters the suitors in a blaze of pent-up rage and mythic justice. It's debated whether this bloody homecoming was celebrated or criticized in later Greek culture. But either way, it's dramatic. Penelope finally recognizes him, partly because he knows a secret about their bed. Literally, it's carved into a living tree, romantic and a bit creepy. Still, it works. And at last, Odysseus rests. The war hero, trickster, wanderer, home at last. You exhale as the sails drop, as the sea goes still. But Greek mythology doesn't end with happy reunions. There are deeper stories to uncover, darker questions to face. The gods may have stepped back, but the humans they left behind, their fates are still unwinding. You barely have time to shake the sea salt from your skin before you're swept into the next storm. One that doesn't churn water, but bloodlines. You've stepped into the shadow-drenched world of the House of Atreus, a family so cursed, so astronomically unlucky, it makes Odysseus look like he won the lottery. Let's rewind. Long before Troy burned and suitors bled out in Ithaca, there was Tantalus, a king who made the ultimate social faux pas. He invited the gods over for dinner and served them his own son. Yep. He chopped up little Pelops and tossed him in the stew like it was just another Tuesday. Bold move. The gods noticed, mostly because Demeter, distracted by grief over Persephone, accidentally took a bite. Whoops. The other gods recoiled in horror and restored Pelops to life, minus the shoulder, which they replaced with ivory. Historians still argue whether this is a moral tale or just a bizarre culinary footnote. Tantalus, he was damned to Tartarus, where he stands eternally thirsty beneath a branch of fruit that always recedes and water that drains before he can drink. That's where we get the word tantalize, by the way. Congratulations. You'll never look at that SAT word the same again. Pelops, reassembled and surprisingly well-adjusted, grows up to be quite the suitor himself. He sets his eyes on Hippodamia, but there's a catch. Her father challenges all would-be husbands to a deadly chariot race. Losers die. Fun wedding tradition, right? Pelops cheats. He bribes the king's charioteer to sabotage the wheels. He wins the race and Hippodamia, but also curses himself when the saboteur dies horribly after being betrayed. From here, the curse snowballs. Pelops has two sons, Atreus and Thyestes. Now things get really messy. These brothers can't stand each other. Thyestes seduces Atreus' wife. In revenge, Atreus kills Thyestes' sons, cooks them, and serves them to him at a feast. Sound familiar? That's two cannibal dinners in one family. If there were Yelp reviews for ancient banquets, this clan would have 0 stars. Thyestes, understandably upset, flees and fathers a son named Aegisthus with his own daughter. Yep, that happened. Why? Because an oracle told him his child would avenge him. This family tree is less a tree and more a tangled, flaming shrub. Fast forward. Atreus has 2 sons of his own, Agamemnon and Menelaus. You remember them from the whole Troy fiasco, Menelaus being the one whose wife Helen was borrowed by Paris. Agamemnon, meanwhile, led the Greek army, but at great personal cost. Before sailing to Troy, Agamemnon angered Artemis by killing a sacred deer. She demands a horrible price, the sacrifice of his daughter, Iphigenia. He does it. Some say she was killed. Others claim she was whisked away by Artemis and made a priestess. Scholars still debate whether this tale was a late addition to soften the myth's brutality or preserve its divine justice. Agamemnon comes home from Troy, victorious but doomed. His wife, Clytemnestra, has been stewing in grief and rage for a decade. She hasn't forgiven him for Iphigenia's death, or for returning with a new concubine, Cassandra, the cursed prophetess of Troy. So Clytemnestra welcomes Agamemnon into the bath, gives him a robe with no armholes, then stabs him to death. Cassandra is killed too. Revenge served hot, and guess who helps her? Aegisthus, the child born of incest, son of Thyestes. The family curse just keeps cashing checks. But wait, enter Orestes, Agamemnon's son. He's been raised in exile, but now he returns to avenge his father. He kills his mother, Clytemnestra, and Aegisthus. Heroic, tragic, a little of both. But the gods don't care for matricide, even when it's justified. Orestes is haunted by the Furies, ancient spirits of vengeance who basically specialize in psychological horror. They don't stab, they whisper, gnawing guilt into your soul until you unravel. Orestes flees to Delphi, seeking guidance from the oracle. Apollo defends him, but it's not enough. He must stand trial in Athens, yes, the Athens, before a jury of mortals. This marks a turning point in Greek mythology, from blood feuds to law, from endless vengeance to civic order. The trial ends in a tie. Athena casts the deciding vote, sparing Orestes. The Furies accept the verdict and are transformed into the Eumenides, the kindly ones. Justice evolves. Violence quiets. For a moment, at least. You step away from the carnage of the house of Atreus, wondering how anyone survived that family without developing a deep need for therapy. But there's a strange beauty in the chaos. Myths so outrageous they feel dreamlike, yet packed with the raw emotions of grief, rage, loyalty, and remorse. And just when you think the worst is behind you, a new world looms ahead, and one of heroes not born of curses, but forged in valor, where gods watch from above and monsters stir below. You've survived the haunted halls of Greek tragedy. Now, it's time to rise into the age of heroes. You step out from the blood-drenched corridors of cursed dynasties and into something a little brighter, though no less dangerous. Now begins the age of heroes, where divine favor and mortal grit intertwine, and every corner of Greece seems to produce a demigod with biceps, baggage, and a mission from the gods. Let's start with the biggest name in the game, Heracles, or as the Romans called him, Hercules. You've probably seen the sanitized versions, muscled hero, lion skin fashion, lots of shouting. But the original Heracles, far more tragic and just as absurd. Born from Zeus, surprise, surprise, and a mortal woman named Alcmene, Heracles was fated for greatness and a lifetime of divine trolling. Hera, still seething over Zeus's infidelity, can you blame her? Sends two serpents to kill the infant in his crib. Heracles strangles them both. In his swaddle, classic Tuesday, he grows up to be a colossal figure, physically, yes, but also emotionally volatile. One dark day, Hera clouds his mind, and he slaughters his wife and children in a frenzy. When he regains clarity, the horror is unbearable. As penance, he's sentenced to perform 12 labors, which read like the worst to-do list in mythological history. You clean Augeas' stables in a day, we're talking years of divine manure here. Strangle the Nemean lion, slay the nine-headed hydra, which, fun twist, regrows two heads for every one you chop off. There's a golden-horned deer to catch, a man-eating bird infestation to handle, and eventually, a trip to the underworld to wrestle Cerberus, the three-headed dog. No big deal. Each task strips him down, forcing him to face both monsters and his own guilt. Heracles isn't a clean-cut superhero. He's a deeply broken man, clawing back dignity through suffering. Some scholars even argue the labors reflect a ritualistic purification myth, mapping out an ancient path to redemption. Others think it's just good action storytelling. And yet, he's not alone in his epic arc. Enter Theseus, the Athenian poster boy for cleverness and chaos. He claims divine lineage from Poseidon, though his mortal dad, King Aegeus, gets the credit. His youth is filled with petty heroics, flipping bandits over cliffs and creatively punishing thieves in poetic, overly complicated ways. You know, typical teen rebellion. But Theseus's defining moment comes in Crete, inside the labyrinth built by Daedalus, where the Minotaur waits, half man, half bull, fully terrifying. Theseus volunteers as tribute, sails in, and with the help of Ariadne's thread, finds his way out after slaying the beast. Great, right? Except he then ditches Ariadne on a random island and forgets to switch his ship's sails from black to white. His father sees the black sails, assumes his son is dead, and throws himself into the sea, hence the Aegean Sea. Oops. Theseus eventually becomes king, but not a wise one. His latter days are marked by bad decisions, like trying to kidnap Persephone from the underworld. Hades glues him to a chair for eternity. Only Heracles, during one of his casual underworld strolls, manages to yank him free. And even then, part of Theseus stays stuck behind. Literally, you'll never sit quite right again. And what about Jason and his band of merry muscle, the Argonauts? They're not hunting monsters, but a shiny, magical golden fleece. Jason assembles a dream team of Greek heroes, including Heracles, Orpheus, and even Atalanta, the only woman in the squad. The fleece is guarded in Colchis, on the edge of the known world. Jason wins it with the help of Medea, a sorceress princess who goes full ride or die, betraying her homeland, killing her own brother, and helping Jason escape. They return to Greece, fleece in hand, but Jason ditches Medea for a political marriage. Big mistake. Medea gets her revenge by killing their children and his new bride. It's one of the darkest turns in all mythology, and historians still argue whether Euripides wrote Medea as a cautionary tale, a proto-feminist icon, or both. These heroes don't just slay monsters, they create them through betrayal, pride, and heartbreak. Their triumphs are never clean, their legacies always mixed. But even with all the drama, this era sparkles with a certain reckless optimism. You feel it as you drift from island to island, watching mortals dare to challenge fate, to outwit gods, to define their own names, and just as you think things can't get grander, they do. Because up ahead lies the myth to end all myths. A 10-year war, a city in flames, a horse with a secret, and a single heel that changes everything. Troy awaits. You can already smell the burning sails before you see the coast of Troy. Thousands of ships bobbing like angry teeth against the shoreline. An army of Greeks unloading in waves, bronze glinting, war cries rippling across the sand. Welcome to the Trojan War, where the gods stir the pot, mortals spill blood, and nobody makes it out clean. It all starts, as many great disasters do, with a wedding invitation, or rather, a lack of one. The gods are partying at Pelis and Thetis' wedding. Yes, the same Thetis who'll mother a particularly famous brooding hero. But one goddess, Eris, is snubbed. She crashes the party with a golden apple inscribed to the fairest. Instantly, Hera, Aphrodite, and Athena begin squabbling. Enter Paris, Prince of Troy, chosen to judge the first celestial beauty pageant. The bribes are intense. Hera offers power. Athena promises wisdom. Aphrodite? She offers the love of the most beautiful woman in the world, Helen of Sparta. Paris picks Aphrodite, sails off to Sparta, and promptly spirits Helen away. Whether she goes willingly or is kidnapped, historians still argue whether Helen had agency or was simply a pawn in divine scheming. Either way, Helen's husband, Menelaus, is not amused. His brother Agamemnon musters all of Greece. From Odysseus to Nestor, from Ajax the Great to Diomedes, they gather under black sails, all for Helen, the face that launched 1,000 ships. And of course, there's Achilles, born of a goddess, dipped in the Styx, except for that one infamously soft heel. Achilles is the Greeks' fiercest weapon, and also their most petulant. He sulks in his tent for half the war, because Agamemnon snatches his favorite war prize. The result? Mass slaughter. Without Achilles, the Greeks falter. until Patroclus, his best friend, or more, depending on who you ask, dons his armor to rally the troops. It ends badly. Hector, Troy's noblest defender, slays him. Achilles goes berserk. He returns to the battlefield, slays Hector in brutal fashion, and drags his body behind a chariot for days. Gruesome? Yes. Historically interesting? Absolutely. Some scholars believe Achilles represents the duality of Greek heroism, equal parts glory and destruction. But even Achilles can't cheat fate. One poisoned arrow, guided by Apollo and shot by Paris, strikes his heel. The war grinds on. More death, more deception. The gods flip allegiances like drunk gamblers. Poseidon helps the Greeks, then wrecks their ships. Athena plots sneak attacks. Aphrodite flings her favorite sons into danger, only to pull them out in the nick of time, 10 years. That's how long this stalemate drags on, until Odysseus, the crafty, sleep-deprived king of Ithaca, comes up with a plan. A giant wooden horse, hollow inside. The Greeks pretend to sail away, leaving the horse as a gift. The Trojans, giddy with premature victory, roll it into the city. At night, Greek warriors spill out like termites. The gates are thrown open. Troy burns. Helen is returned to Sparta. Paris is dead. Hector, too. Priam, the aged Trojan king, is slain at the altar. Only Aeneas, carrying his father on his back, escapes to found what will one day become Rome. You might think the story ends here, in ashes and silence. But no, because the Greek heroes still have to get home, and that's where things get weird. You step over the scorched ruins of Troy, the embers still whispering betrayal, gods, and war. But now, the dust settles, and the real chaos begins. Because for the survivors of this mythic war, the journey home proves just as legendary and cursed. Let's follow Odysseus, the clever, reluctant hero of Ithaca. You'd think, after 10 years of war, he'd sail home, hug his wife, and call it a day. But nope, the gods have one more marathon in store for him. The Odyssey, 10 more years, 10 more trials, and not a single straightforward route. It starts innocently enough. Odysseus and his crew leave Troy, but immediately insult Poseidon by blinding his Cyclops son, Polyphemus. Not ideal. Poseidon, oceanic tantrum extraordinaire, swears to keep them drifting forever, and drift they do. First, you land on the island of the Lotus Eaters, where lazy fruit makes the crew forget their homes entirely. You barely snap them out of it. Then there's Circe, a sorceress who turns your men into pigs. Odysseus resists, with divine help, and they spend a year resting in her villa. Some historians argue that Circe represents the ancient Greek anxiety over female power and temptation. Onward to the underworld, where Odysseus seeks advice from the dead, including his mom, Awkward, and the ghost of Achilles, who, post-death, admits that maybe this whole hero glory-death thing was overrated. Then come the sirens, who sing sailors to madness. Odysseus plugs his crew's ears with wax and ties himself to the mast just to listen. You swerve past Scylla, the six-headed sea monster, and Charybdis, a ship-swallowing whirlpool. Your crew thins, your sanity frays. Eventually, the last straw, your starving men kill sacred cattle on Helios' island. Zeus zaps your ship. Everyone dies, except you. You wash ashore on Calypso's island, where the goddess keeps you as her not-so-unwilling companion for 7 years. 7. Some versions paint it like paradise. Others, eternal captivity with no escape. Scholars still debate whether Odysseus was seduced or just delayed by his own hesitation to return to mortal burdens. At last, the gods intervene. Calypso lets him go. Odysseus shipwrecks once more, drags himself onto the beaches of Phaeacia, spins his tale to a sympathetic court, and finally returns to Ithaca. But his homecoming isn't sweet. His palace overflows with arrogant suitors trying to marry his wife, Penelope, who's cleverly stalled them for years by weaving a shroud by day and unpicking it by night. Odysseus, disguised as a beggar, enters his own halls unnoticed. Then comes revenge. He strings his bow, kills every suitor, and reclaims his throne. You'd expect a happy ending, and you get one, sort of. Because behind the curtain of these myths, there's always a cost. Families lost, time devoured, gods unsatisfied. But Odysseus is just one hero among many. Agamemnon, leader of the Greek army, returns home only to be murdered in his bathtub by his wife, Clytemnestra, and her lover. She, in turn, is killed by her son, Orestes, whose own mind fractures from the guilt. And Menelaus? He makes it home with Helen, but nothing is quite the same. They live out their days in strained silence. The war might have ended, but the wounds keep festering beneath the marble. So, the age of heroes ends not with parades, but with questions. Regret, trauma. These weren't gods, after all, just mortals with big egos, divine parentage, and the impossible task of surviving stories too large for them. And as the fires of mythology begin to dim, you feel the air cool. The gods begin to withdraw. The curtain falls. And now, slowly, we wind down. You take one last look over the mythic world, now dimly glowing like embers in the ashes. The clamor of war, the thrum of prophecy, the divine laughter, they all begin to fade, like dreams unremembered at sunrise. You feel the quiet stretch out before you. The monsters have returned to their caves. The gods slip back into the clouds. Even the mighty Heracles lowers his lion-cloaked head to rest. You are no longer sailing through cursed waters or climbing Olympus barefoot. You're just floating now, softly. And though the names echo still, Zeus, Athena, Achilles, Medea, they seem gentler somehow, as if they've stepped off their pedestals and become echoes in a museum you once visited, barefoot, half awake. Whatever the truth behind these tales, you've walked among legends. You've seen the price of glory, the beauty of ruin, the tangled dance between fate and choice, and you've survived, unlike so many of the heroes you followed. So now, let yourself drift. Let the myths dissolve into moonlight. No monsters will find you here. No sirens sing tonight. Only the hush of sleep and the memory of gods who once walked beside you. Good night. End of script. Sweet dreams.